we're going to talk about the different parts of expressions. So, an expression is a group of terms with no equal sign. So, okay, what is a term? A term is each part of an expression that's separated by a plus or minus sign, or addition or subtraction sign. What's important to know is that if there's a subtraction sign, that makes the term negative. So in this case of 5 plus 8x, you have two terms. The two terms are the 5 and the 8x. So you have a term there and a term there. Now we have a variable. A variable is a letter to represent an unknown number. In this case, the variable is the x. So that is the variable. Next, we have a coefficient. The coefficient is an important one. This is the number that's in front of the variable. Now this, when it's right next to the variable, that actually means multiplication. So it's being multiplied by the variable. It tells you really how many variables you have. If you don't see a coefficient, there is a coefficient. It's just an invisible coefficient of 1. One thing that confuses people, a coefficient, it does not include the variable. So in this case, the coefficient is the 8. Okay, it does not include the variable. One thing you want to know is that when you have a coefficient in a variable, you are always going to write it with the coefficient and then variable. Meaning, like in this case, it was 8 times x, so you would put 8x. You would not put x8. Or let's say you wanted to say 4 times c. You would put 4c. You would never write c times 4 or c4. You're always going to put the number and then the letter. Next, we're going to talk about a constant. A constant always confuses people, but y'all, a constant's nothing to be scared of. It's really literally just a regular number. So it's a number that doesn't have a variable. Again, y'all, it's just a regular number. So what would the constant in the expression above be? 5. This is your constant right there. So let's just practice this. So we have 4x plus 5. So the terms, remember, they're separated by an addition and subtraction sign. So the terms would be 4x and 5. The variables, the variable is a letter that represents the unknown amount. In this case, it would be the x. Coefficient is that number in front of the variable. And what is that? 4. And the constant would be 5. This next one. Essentially, remember, it's the terms are separated by the addition or subtraction sign. Remember when I said that the subtraction sign makes the term negative? If I was going to like cut this apart, here's the two terms. Notice that says 2m and that says negative 8. Because I could essentially make that 2m plus a negative 8. So your terms are 2m and negative 8. The variable would be m. Your coefficient is 2 because that's the number in front of that letter. And the constant is negative 8. It's not just 8, it's negative 8. Okay, this next one. Terms. Notice there's no addition or subtraction sign, so this only has one term. The term is negative 5j. The variable is that letter, that's j. Your coefficient, it's not just 5. You have to include that negative with it, so that is negative 5. Okay, so that is, there's our coefficient. The constant, tricked you, there are none. Okay, there's no number there without a letter attached to it. Okay, I'm going to go over here. This one has 3 terms. Okay, it's just like this. I have 3y, 8, and 2y. What variables do you see? Remember, variables are the letters. So that is y. Your coefficient are the numbers in front of the variables. So that would be these right here, which would be 3 and 2. And your constants are the numbers without a variable. That would be 8. Okay, I want you to try the next 2 on your own, and then let's see how you do. Okay, so for this next one, if I cut it apart, it would be like this. Okay, so my terms would be right here. I would have 2c, that looks like a -3, a c, and a 12. So what are the variables? The variables, that was just your c. Your coefficients, this is where you got to be careful. So it looks like there's just the one coefficient, which was 2. But there's an invisible coefficient right there of a 1 right there. So my coefficients are actually 2 and 1. And then the constants, those are just your regular plain numbers. Be careful, that's a -3 and a +12. Because remember, I could really make that plus a negative. So -3 and 12. This next one, you got to be careful with this one as well. If I cut this apart, I have a 3, -m, -4n, and 1. So there's your terms right there. I have 3, -m, -4n, and 1. What are the variables? The variables are m and n. Coefficients, this is the tricky one because there's some invisible things happening here. There's that invisible 1, but remember, I could rewrite this with like plus and negative. So I could rewrite this as 3 plus a -m plus a -4n plus 1. So therefore, when I'm talking about my coefficients, I have this -1 and also a -4. Okay, because remember that was that negative coefficient right there. So my coefficients are actually -1 and -4. And then my constants are 3 and 1. You see them right there? Those are just the regular old numbers. Now we're going to talk about the difference between an expression and an equation. So an expression, it's a group of terms with no equal sign. So 7 plus 2x plus 8, that's an expression. There is no equal sign. An expression cannot be solved. Okay, I can't solve an expression. I can only simplify it or evaluate it. So it can only be simplified or evaluated. So in this case, this is called an algebraic expression because algebra, it has letters in it. When we do order of operations, we're simplifying an expression. You're trying to condense it as much as you can. So in this case, what I could do to this expression, 7 plus 2x plus 8, is I could simplify it by combining like terms, which we'll talk more about. But that would be like making it 2x plus 15. That's simplifying that expression. So when you have an expression, there's nothing to solve. You can't solve it. It's impossible to find the value of the variable because I have no idea what it equals. So I have no clue what that x is in this case. But that leads us to an equation. An equation is made up of two equal expressions. So if I have x plus 8 equals 13, x plus 8 is an expression, and 13 is an expression. So it's made up of those two equal expressions. Now, if it's an equation, it can be solved, and the big thing is it has an equal sign. That is the big difference between an expression and equation. An equation has an equal sign, and it can be solved. So I can figure out the value of that x. Now, so in an equation, it is possible to find the value of the variable. So looking at this, the biggest difference between these, so when you're trying to figure this out, an expression has no equal sign, while an equation has an equal sign. An expression can't be solved, it can only be simplified or evaluated, and an equation can be solved. So we're going to look at these and decide is it an expression or is it an equation? So let's look at this first one. 5 plus 9 divided by 2 is 7. If I was going to write what this is, notice that is, what that means is it's saying this thing is equal to 7. If it has an equal sign, that means it is an equation. Now, if I wanted to write out what this looked like, this is saying 5 plus 9 divided by 2. So that's 5 plus 9, and the whole thing is divided by 2 equals 7. Because remember, we show division with a fraction bar now. Let's look at this one. 13 plus 2 equals 15. What do you notice? That equal sign. That makes that an equation. I'm going to stick to this half of the page real quick. Let's look at this one. 2 times 3 times 4 minus 8. Do you see an equal sign? No? Me neither. That means this is an expression. This is what we call a numerical expression because it's just numbers. You don't really need to know that, but it's a numerical expression. Okay, this next one, 3 times 5/10 plus f. Is there anything that would be like an equal sign? No? Then that means it's an expression. This is 3 times 5/10 plus f. That would be like 3 times 5/10 plus f. Notice there's a letter in it. That would make it an algebraic expression, but it's an expression. Okay, let's look at this one. 5 times j is 25. Because it has that is, that's going to be like your equal sign. So that means it is an equation. Now, how would I write that? Because it says 5 times j, when I want to multiply a number and a letter, I would write that with that coefficient. So I would actually write 5j equals 25. You're not going to put a multiplication sign there. You're just going to take that number and that letter and squish them together. Okay, a number squared divided by 5. Well, let's think about this. A number squared So if it doesn't tell you the number, you use a variable. So let's just say in for number. I don't know. A number squared, remember squared is with the power of 2, divided by 5. Is there anything that means equal? Nope. So that is an expression. And this is an algebraic expression because it's got algebra, it's got letters in it. Okay, I'm going to go to the other half of the page. I want you to try this half on your own and then see if you got the same things. Hopefully you got that 2m minus 5 equals 19 is an equation. This next one, 4 more than half of h. That, there's nothing that means equal, so that is an expression. In case you're wondering how you would write that, we'll get into more of that later, but half of h, that would be half of h plus 4, so it'd be like that. This one right here, there's an equal sign, so that's an equation. 2 more than 13 is 15. Is means equal. So that's like 13 plus 2 is 15. That is an equation. 4j plus 8 minus 2j minus 7. No equal sign. That's an expression. Okay, and this next one everyone always struggles with. The product of 5 and 12. Product does mean answer to multiplication problem, but that's telling us, hey, multiply it. So that means the product of 5 and 12 means multiply. So that would be 5 times 12. There's no equal sign. It doesn't tell us what it equals. I know we can figure it out, but it doesn't tell us what it equals. That is an expression. It's just a numerical expression. Now we're going to practice this. So for each algebraic expression, we're going to highlight the variables yellow, the constants pink, the coefficients green, and then we're going to circle the terms. So let's start with the variables. The variables are the letters. So 2x plus 3, x is a variable. And the next one, 4xy minus 2x, what are the variables? X and y are both variables, and x. When it says 4xy, what that really means is 4 times x times y. Okay, the next one we have f and g. G, then p, and notice I'm not highlighting that exponent. That's not part of the variable. And then q. Constants, pink. Constants are just those regular numbers. So 3. The next one, there are no constants because there's no, all the numbers have letters attached. This one, same thing, no constants. What about this one? There is a constant of 200. Okay, and now the coefficient's green. In this first one, my coefficient is 2. Notice it's not 2x, it's just 2. The next one is 4. And you got to be careful on this next one because it's really like plus and negative. So when I talk about what the coefficient is, it's a -2. So either make it plus a negative or include that negative sign with it. So then here, it's 12, and then that's really makes it a -12. Then here, what? There's no coefficient. Oh, yes, there is. What is the coefficient? It's an invisible 1, so there is a coefficient there. Here, I'm going to have 3 and the 4. I do not need to include that exponent. The exponent's just an exponent. It's not a constant. It's not a coefficient. It's not a variable. It's just an exponent. And now we're going to circle the terms. So here's a term and here's a term. Term and a term. Term and a, if it's negative, I usually, or subtraction, I include that because that makes the term negative. because remember the terms are separated by the addition and subtraction signs. I want you to see if you can figure out the label for each one, and then let's check. Okay, so the 3 is a coefficient, the b is your variable, 2 is your constant, then here's a term and here's a term, and the whole thing is an expression. If you want to get more specific, you could say that it is an algebraic expression, but it's an expression.